Hey guys, welcome to our informational interview. Today we have Sahana Prasad. She is a social worker, specifically a trauma therapist. I'm Christina.
I'm Danya.
And I'm Stefan.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you guys for being here. So here we have Sahana Prasad. It's the first informational interview for June, so that's kind of exciting. But to move on, I just wanted to take 20 seconds of silence in support of justice, equality, and human rights. If we can start now. Thank you. You have you have the rights to be seen, heard, respected as a citizen of the world. You have the right to be protected from harm, injustice, and hatred. And if feel free to take a screenshot of this if you feel like you need either one of those to take action for today. Yeah, we can move on now.
So for the overview, at 4:10, we're gonna do group introductions. And at 4:15, we're gonna interview and have students ask questions. And at 4:55, we're gonna wrap up and reflect. And at 5, the call is gonna end. And just so you can get the most out of this call, go grab a paper and pen to take some notes. And everyone should ask try and ask at least one question.
So here are the businesses who have previously supported Passion Impact, and we encourage you to support them when you can. And if you have any of your favorite ones, you can shout them out.
Safeway.
It was Safeway. Oh, man. Bambuza.
Always. Motorcurbs. Just Bob.
All right. Meeting expectations. Rue will be watching us today, as always. We're going to follow these to a T. So we show gratitude and respect for all those in the video chat. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're coming from, we are going to show that to everybody. You are muted by the facilitator, and you can be unmuted when you raise your hand. So I want to make sure that everybody practices raising their hand. Best way to do that is to go to the bottom, select participants, and then move to the right to make sure that your hand is raised. All right, we got Tamara, we got Mary, we got Sasha, Danny, Jessica, who else? Danny. Eliza, have you figured out how to do it? Fordosa, do you know how to do it? All right, so if you look at that, do you have this screen where it says participants right here? Should show participants at the bottom of your screen. And then once you click it, a whole sidebar will come up and it says raise hand there. Nice, Eliza, got that. Nice, Fordosa, great. Awesome, so we'll use that when you have a question, and it'll come up in a queue so that when you raise your hand, the next person who raises their hand just follows in order. So it'll be easy for us to then kind of go who's next. No nudity, vulgar, or demeaning language, inappropriate sharing of your screen, or inappropriate background images will be tolerated. So please just make sure that you look behind you, you know you're okay, and that you don't pull anything up on your screen that should be inappropriate. We do reserve the right to remove any individuals from our programs, and depending upon the severity of the offense, you might be kicked out, potentially banned from future PI programs. Just want to make that known. I don't expect anybody to ever do that, but just in case, we want to make sure that that's expected now. Screen names as your first name only. I think everybody's there. And the name of the game today is just to have fun and stay engaged. passing it back off.
So Sahana Prasad is a social worker and oops, sorry, I clicked on the slide. Is a social worker and trauma therapist at Oregon State University. She is passionate about supporting survivors of interpersonal and structural violence in their journeys to healing. Her practice of individual and group therapy is centered on supporting folks with multiple marginalized identities and understanding the ways in which dismantling oppressive systems is imperative to the prevention of interpersonal violence. Outside of therapy and survival advocacy, Sahana Prasad is passionate about dogs, carbs, California, poppies, sunshine, and Carly Rae Jepsen.
Awesome.
Yeah, a quick group introduction where just to get to warm up and get to know each other a little more. We'll be introducing ourselves by name, pronouns, if you go to school, school, and the question of the day, what in life is beautiful to you? I can start it off. So my name is Danya. My pronouns is she and her. I go to Franklin High School, and the question of the day, what in life is beautiful to you? I think it's probably seeing like my family members all gathered together, laughing and enjoying the time. So I think that's the most beautiful thing to me in life. Yeah, we can. And we're gonna popcorn this to other. Sorry, I can't talk right now. So I'll popcorn that to Christina.
I'm Christina. I go by she, her pronouns. I go to school at Franklin High School. And I guess knowing that, I think life is beautiful because just the fact that I think, well, for me, I think everyone has a purpose in life, and I think that about life is beautiful. And I'll popcorn it to Stefan.
Hi, my name is Stefan. I go by he, him. My university was James Madison, and I think music is most beautiful, and it really provides just what we see as the beauty, the real beauty that it holds. I'm going to popcorn it to Fardosa.
Hi, my name is Fardosa. Those are my last name.
It's up to you.
Fardosa Ali. My pronouns are she, her. I go to Franklin High School. And the question of the day, when life is beautiful to me. I think, I don't know, people's vision, like people's visions and how they see the world and everything. Like how everybody can see. Like, I don't know, I can't put it into words. And I'll popcorn it to Mary.
Hi, my name is Mary Gurung. I go by she and her pronouns. I go to Franklin High School, and I think in life what's beautiful to me is dancing. I'm not good at it, but I think it's really fun, and I think it brings a lot of people together, even if you don't know them. I'm gonna popcorn it to Tamara.
Exciting. I'm excited to get popcorn from Mary. My name's Tamara. I use she and her pronouns. I go to Oregon State. And what's beautiful in life to me is I think just seeing people gather in community and like having really authentic conversations with one another, whether they be tough conversations or conversations where people are like laughing and having a lot of joy and fun. Seeing people just come together and being authentic in who they are is really beautiful to me. And I will popcorn it to Danny.
Hi, I'm Danny Ivy. My pronouns are she and her. I go to Franklin, and I'm going to go to OSU in the fall. Go Beavs! What in life is beautiful to me? I think, music is beautiful. Weather, I think how unexpected it is really beautiful. and seeing communities come together and like talk about how they feel and do activities together. I think that's really something special. I'll popcorn it to Sasha.
Hi, my name is Sasha. I go by he, him pronouns. I also go to Franklin and will be going to OSU in the fall. What in life is beautiful to you? I think seeing someone do something that they enjoy. And I will popcorn it to Melissa.
Hi, my name is Melissa. I go by she, her, they pronouns. I'm a student at Portland State. And in terms of what is beautiful in life, I think a lot of the things that everybody's already said, I would definitely say like echo self-expression, but for the sake of saying something different, I really appreciate like wild nature that has been untouched by humans. And I'll popcorn it to Eliza.
Hi, my name's Eliza. My pronouns are she, her, and I go to Franklin. And I think I'm gonna say the same thing as Melissa. I think nature is probably the most beautiful part of life. And I'm gonna popcorn it to has Adriana gone yet?
Okay. Hi. I know it says tomorrow, but I can't use my audio or it will hurt your ears. My name is Adriana. I use she and her pronouns, and I don't go to school. I graduated from Oregon State, though. Go Beavs, once again. And what's beautiful, kind of like people have said music, but specifically I would say the moment when you're at like a concert and you kind of like realize where you are and you see that this entire random mass amounts of people are here to experience like one thing and like with the only goal to like be happy and experience happiness. I think that's really beautiful and I really like it. And yeah, popcorn to Jessica.
All right. My name is Jessica. I use she, her pronouns, and I also go to Franklin High School. And one thing that's beautiful in life for me is like seeing a smile on everyone's faces and like it just enjoying themselves every day. Yeah. I don't know. I just pass it to whomever didn't go yet. So.
Sahana, is that you, the last one?
I think it's maybe just me. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Sahana. Thank you all so much for having me here. It is such a joy to share this space with you. My pronouns are she, her. I work at Oregon State University. I'm an alum of the University of Michigan and the University of Chicago. I love everyone's answers about what is beautiful to them. I wholeheartedly endorse all of the things that you all have to say. And like Melissa, for the sake of saying something that has not been said yet, I would like to say that mangoes are beautiful to me, and I'm very happy to be back in mango season. That's where I'm at.
Oh yeah, thank you for being here, and let's get started. Well, I just wanted to ask like a good basic question. You already touched about places you already went to school, but if you can talk about more about your education background and your current job right now.
Yeah, I sure can. So as I mentioned, I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Michigan. I am from Michigan originally. I'm in Michigan right now. And so I decided to stay in state, mostly for financial reasons, but really enjoyed being at the University of Michigan. And I went to college thinking that I was going to be a biology major. Clearly did not end up a biology major. And so I left the University of Michigan with a degree in women's studies and a minor in community action and social change. The University of Michigan doesn't have a bachelor's degree in social work, so their community action and social change minor is the way for undergraduate students to sort of get their foot in the door with social work. And so that's a pretty sharp shift in trajectory, and I wonder some of you might be imagining how I ended up there. And so I took a women's studies class my second semester of college with a professor who was really tremendous in sort of like shaping my vision for my career and thinking about like how to really apply the things that I was passionate about in a way that was like tangible. And so I spent the rest of my time at the University of Michigan continuing to engage in the Women's Studies program, and I did a study abroad program doing some community teaching around HIV and AIDS prevention, and did a lot of reproductive justice work and did survivor support work for survivors of interpersonal violence while I was an undergraduate student. And so all of that really solidified for me that that was the realm that I wanted to be in, sort of thinking about like how to support other folks and my peers through challenging experiences, and to really use the strengths that I had around active listening and empathy and sort of understanding of structural things and the way in which they impact folks to really guide and support folks through their healing journey. And so as an undergraduate student, I worked at the University of Michigan Sexual Assault Prevention and Awareness Center. And I did some work with them mostly around like outreach and some prevention work, but really mostly thinking about like how do we make sure that students on our campus know what our resources are and how to access us, but also how do we make folks aware of the impact of sexual and interpersonal violence on folks, so that we can all think together about how can we be a stronger community in supporting folks that have experienced this, and also a stronger community in preventing violence from happening. And so that's sort of the perspective I took in thinking about where I wanted to go career-wise as I left college. But I also knew that I wanted to take some time because I had just done 16 straight years of school, right? When you go straight from all the way through your public schooling or private schooling into college, that's a lot of school all at once. And so I knew that I wanted a little bit of a break to sort of think about where I wanted to go next. I was pretty certain that social work was the right path for me, and thinking about wanting to apply the skills that I had built as an undergrad and sort of take that forward into a profession. And also part of the thing that really led me to realize that social work was the path for me is that all of the jobs that I tried to apply for out of undergrad really wanted somebody with a master's degree in social work. And so that sort of guided me to recognizing that like maybe this is a thing that would really serve me as I move into my career, right? And so I did end up taking close to 2 years between undergrad and grad school, and spent that time working at a women's health clinic in Michigan as a patient advocate and care provider. And that was a really transformative experience for me, and I think really solidified that what I wanted to do was social work, because in that position, what I was really able to see is the ways that sort of larger systems and things like laws and history really impact people at the individual level and impact their decision making around their health and around pregnancy and all of that. And so I really, especially as somebody that was providing counseling and advocacy to patients, was recognizing that it's really important for me as somebody in a care position to think about how are larger systems and histories and laws and things like that impacting the people that I work with individually every day. And what is my obligation as somebody that wants to provide that care and advocacy to make change, both at sort of the individual level, like person to person, but also on a larger level, right? And as I did more research and thinking about sort of like what that could look like for me, it became really clear that social work was the field that was going to allow me to do that in the way that felt most meaningful for me. And so I applied to like 5 or 6 different social work programs, and ended up deciding to get my degree in my master's in social work at the University of Chicago. So that was a 2-year-long graduate program, and both of those years involved both taking classes as well as doing a practicum internship. And so I was providing social work services in a variety of different capacities both of the years that I was in graduate school. And so the first year that I was in grad school, I was working at what's called a federally qualified healthcare center, which is a sort of like wraparound service provider. So like medical care and dental care and like behavioral health care, which is the term that folks use for like therapy or mental health care in that field. And so I was working essentially in a community mental health setting, providing therapy to folks on the south side of Chicago. And then my second year of graduate school, I had the tremendous opportunity to work as a trauma therapist at a community rape crisis center in the city of Chicago. So working specifically doing trauma therapy with survivors in both individual and group settings. And something really cool that I got to do while I was working there in my second year internship was to pioneer a woman of color support group, which is something that was really, really important to me. And so that was the first one that they had ever had there, and they've carried that forward since I've left, which is like a really amazing thing to see happen, but also really sort of informed what I wanted to focus my practice on and what I've continued to focus my practice on since leaving grad school. And so I came to Oregon State to be the coordinator of interpersonal violence services out of their counseling center right out of grad school. I graduated in June of 2018, and I moved to Corvallis in August of 2018 to do this job, and I have been there ever since. Yeah. That was a really long answer to your question.
What a journey it has been.
Yeah,
There's
it sure
a lot
has.
between the beginning and the end, and there's still more to come, I assume.
Yeah.
I know that Christina has a bunch of questions, so I'm going to pass it off to her.
So during graduate school and your internship, I was curious about what kind of training did you undergo to become a social worker, and how does that differ from your training now?
Yeah, so training looks a little bit different for social workers depending on what program you're in, and it also looks a little bit different depending on what your focus is, right? So I am what folks in the field might call a clinical social worker, and then I do clinical therapy practice with folks, right? But there are also social workers who do organizing work, like community organizing. There are social workers that do administrative work or programming work and do things like manage nonprofits or create programming at nonprofits, or do case management, which is sort of like helping folks manage all of the different services that they might need access to. And so training around sort of all of those things looks a little bit different, but I can talk about my experience receiving training as a clinical social worker, and also somebody that received training and sort of thinking about like larger systems and the impact that that has when I do clinical social work, right? So again, my program was 2 years long. The program that I was in sort of divided us up into cohorts. And so all of our cohorts took the same couple of classes to start with. So we all took a foundational course on clinical practice and a foundational course on sort of like the history of social inequality and social movements and thinking and policy-based things and how that relates to our work. And so that sort of gives folks the opportunity to determine which sort of area they might want to focus their work on. And so some folks decided in my program to go down the clinical track, which was my choice, and other folks decided to go down an administrative or more policy-related track. And again, I will say that that's unique to the program that I was in graduate school. The University of Michigan, for example, where I went to undergrad, their graduate social work program has, I think, like 5 or 6 different tracks. And so really dependent on what you decide you want to do, what your focus is. I also, when I was in graduate school, specifically chose to do a program of study, which is kind of the like grad school equivalent of doing a minor in college. But my program of study that I chose to apply to was the violence prevention program. And so again, I came to grad school knowing that I wanted to do survivor support work and work around interpersonal violence prevention. And so I specifically chose to focus my training on that. And similarly, once I had the opportunity to be a little bit more discerning about what classes I wanted to take, I chose to take classes around providing trauma-informed care. I chose to take classes around mindfulness-based clinical interventions. That looks really different than what some of my colleagues in my graduate cohort decided to take. So some folks decided that they wanted to focus their clinical practice on supporting folks through alcohol and drug use. Some folks wanted to work with like older adults. Some folks wanted to work in elementary and middle schools. And so that's to say that training looks really different depending on what your focus is. And also there's lots of different opportunities to do lots of different kinds of things as a social worker, which is one of my favorite things about this profession. Yeah.
With there being all these different tracts, first off, I just want to remind everybody, if you have questions, go ahead and raise your hand. We'll get you on the list. with there being all of these different tracks and you have to pick one, right? Like that's the direction that you go. Is there any chance that you can stop and like go switch, or is that just the continuing education piece? How does that work? Because you don't want to like
Yeah.
stop in a hole in that sense.
That's a really great question, and I actually think this was something that I really struggled with going into the program. So I entered graduate school knowing fully that I didn't want to be a full-time therapist. But I'm not, right? The position that I have at OSU right now is one that I applied for and decided to take specifically because it allows me to do a blend of clinical practice and sort of more programmatic, or what we call like meso or middle level practice, right? And so I think that a struggle that a lot of folks have when they're deciding on a track is really feeling like they're going to be locked into that track forever, right? And I think that was a struggle that I faced also. I was like, if I choose the clinical track, does that mean that I'm never going to get to do programming work, or I'm never going to get to do prevention work? And that was something that I really struggled with in thinking about which track I wanted to choose. But I think that the great thing about at least my program, and from what I've heard from other colleagues that have been in different social work programs, is that even if you choose a track, there's often the opportunity to take classes in the other track, right? So I know folks that chose to do the administrative social work track in my program that would take some of the clinical classes, because even sometimes as an administrative social worker, it's really important to have good clinical interpersonal skills, right? Or for me, as somebody that chose to do the clinical track, I also chose to take the like violence prevention class that was much more focused on sort of like program assessment and evaluation, because I thought to myself, there might be a time at which I'm doing a more administrative level work, and it might be important for me to know how to evaluate a program, which has very much come in handy for me in the job that I have right now, right? And so I think that this is also a thing that is sort of a question that comes up a lot around even like choosing a major in undergrad, right? Is a fear that if we choose something, we're going to be sort of like locked into that place forever. And I have been there and have felt that fear, and also like want you all to hear again that I went to undergrad thinking that I was going to like be in a biology lab running PCR reactions for the rest of my life. And now I'm a trauma therapist, right? So like there is always room to wiggle. And I think especially in thinking about what it means to be a social worker, there's such a broad spectrum of what it looks like to do this work. And I think there's also a lot of flexibility in moving through that in a really fluid way. And so I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, it seems like you did a lot. Okay. So you went to the clinical track, and now you did violence prevention. And like my personal question is, violence prevention is kind of like a really hard topic to like be around. So like my question is like, why did you pick that,
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think like, not to be cliche and thinking about the name of your organization, but it is something that I just feel really passionate about. Like I truly could not imagine myself doing anything else. And I think that I found, especially doing that work as an undergraduate student, found a lot of community working with folks that were also really passionate about that. And I think that in thinking about like both prevention and response, which are both things that I do, response sort of being the clinical piece of supporting people in a therapeutic setting, prevention being thinking about like policy and initiatives that we can take to make sure that folks don't experience violence in the first place. But I think both of those things feel tremendously rewarding to me in different ways. And you're right, it is a really hard thing to sort of have to contend with as my job every single day. And also, I have been really fortunate to have really great supervisors and mentors that have taught me how to do that well, right? And so I think a lot of that looks like setting really good, healthy boundaries around work. A lot of that is thinking about like, how do I take care of myself, and like, who do I need in my life to be able to hold space for the hard stuff with me? But I think sort of to answer your question about what drew me to this, it almost sometimes feels like I accidentally fell into it, right? Like I took a women's studies class sort of out of curiosity on recommendation from a friend who really liked that professor. That professor in undergrad ended up being one of my like most influential mentors, and then wrote me a letter of recommendation to get into graduate school. And was the one that sort of like guided me to becoming a volunteer doing survivor support work. And so I think like sometimes you just naturally necessarily find the thing that fits decision on the front end, right? Like I went through a phase where I was thinking like, maybe I'll get a public health degree and do violence prevention from a public health standpoint, which is a thing that a lot of my really amazing colleagues do. And also I realized something that just like didn't fit with the way that I wanted to do this work. And so I think that that's to also say that if there is something that you feel really passionate about, I think that there's not necessarily a wrong way to do it. You just got to figure out what works best for you. And this is what works best for me.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think, did we have a question? I feel like we did.
Yeah, I think Adriana had a question. Yes, I am happy to talk about what resources CAPS and OSU provide. So I can start by talking about sort of CAPS more generally and what we provide at CAPS, and then I can talk about sort of what else is available at OSU and folks that are OSU alums or OSU affiliated. If there's anything that I missed or that you want to plug, please let me know. But so CAPS specifically, and in case I didn't say this, CAPS stands for Counseling and Psychological Services, which I feel is a little redundant, but that's our name. And so we offer counseling services sort of broadly to any students at OSU. So that could look like individual therapy, it could look like group therapy. We offer, I think, like close to 30 different groups at CAPS, which is pretty amazing. For concerns, so we have some groups that are identity-based, so I have run a women of color survivor support group. One of my amazing colleagues runs just like a women of color group. We have a gay men's support group, a queer women's support group, a trans support group, a support group for folks that have obsessive compulsive disorder, an anxiety management group, a social anxiety group, like all kinds of things. Chronic pain, we had a group for a while for athletes that had experienced injuries with our amazing sports psychologist. And so lots of groups. And we also offer sometimes some workshops. We offer a single session clinic, which is an opportunity for folks to have like a one-time consultation with one of our staff members if they're not feeling like they need ongoing counseling, but maybe just need like a one-time sort of like problem-solving idea bouncing session. We also have a really wonderful mental health promotions team who are the folks that sort of like go out on campus and do outreach and talk about our services or talk about sort of like how to take care of yourself more generally or the importance of mental health or what mental health means. And so we also offer some crisis intervention resources for folks that are in immediate crisis and need help sort of getting connected to resources or just like somebody to listen and help them figure out what's next. So we're available for that too. In terms of other resources on campus, I will say the two that I interact with most often are the Survivor Advocacy Resource Center, which we call SARC for short. So they are a tremendous office who help folks who have experienced interpersonal violence with their advocacy needs. So advocacy and counseling look a little bit different. What I do with survivors is counseling or therapy, which is sort of to provide space for folks to talk about and process the impact that their experiences have had on them emotionally. What advocacy looks like is having somebody who can help you navigate some other systemic stuff. Like, for example, if someone has experienced violence and it's really impacting their ability to focus in class and they need somebody to help them talk to a professor about dropping a class or getting an extension, that's something that an advocate can help. If a survivor is wanting to file a police report or file a report with the university about what happened to them, that's something that an advocate can help with. If somebody experienced violence in the building that they live in, like in a dorm, and they are wanting to move or they want the person that hurt them to have to move, that's something that an advocate can help them navigate. And so some of those more sort of challenging, like institutional pieces, our advocates provide really, really amazing support and care to folks that I work with around that. And I am so tremendously grateful to have them as colleagues. I really don't know what we would do without them. So I work really closely with them. And then the other resource or the other sort of like campus unit that I work most closely with is diversity and cultural engagement. And so so Tamara works in the Women and Gender Center, and so I do a lot of work with them around sort of thinking about how we can support one another in our programming or what students in their center need. I've done some work with the Native American Longhouse. And so we think together sort of, and again, I mentioned, and I think when Christina was reading my bio, you all saw that I talked a little bit about that I really focus my practice of trauma therapy on supporting survivors who have multiple marginalized identities. And so that means like women of color students or queer students of color, trans students of color, folks that are first generation college students, international students, really thinking about like how I can support their very specific needs. And that really often looks like me collaborating with all of my lovely, wonderful colleagues in other parts of campus to think about how we can use our strengths together to get folks what they need to be successful.
I have a quick question
Yeah.
here. So you're talking a lot about collaboration just then.
Sure did.
And that requires two things that you brought up earlier, which were listening and empathy. And you said that you were really good at them. So this is a two-part question. First is, how did you know that you were good at those to begin with? And then just as we all grow and learn, how did you sharpen those skills? Because those can be used everywhere, but very specifically for your profession.
Totally. The first question is a really good one. And I think how I learned that I was good at it is that I jumped right into doing it, right? So when I talked about taking time off of undergrad and doing a job that really required me to use those skills all day, every day, I think I was receiving feedback from the folks that I was working with in that setting, that the way that I was able to hold space and ask questions and reflect things and really honor and validate people's experiences was helpful. And so I think like receiving feedback was a way that I knew that I was good at that. And also, I don't know if I know how I knew. I think it was just like, I think what it was is like recognizing that I was very good at a job that required me to have those skills. So maybe it was sort of like a roundabout recognition, right? Like I was working as a counselor and patient advocate at a women's health clinic around reproductive health and issues that can be really sensitive and stigmatizing for folks, and realizing that I was able to provide really good care to folks, I think was what allowed me to recognize like, oh, this is a job that requires me to have empathy and active listening skills. And I'm really good at this job, which must mean that I have really good empathy and active listening skills, right? And I think also like, in terms of how I honed those skills, or sort of like how I reflected and built that, I think that really did come out of my training as a social worker, and particularly seeking out sort of, so there are a lot of different ways that you can provide therapy. There's a lot of different sort of like schools of therapy, and I, as like in my training, really sought out sort of modalities of therapy that really focus on ideas of like common humanity and unconditional positive regard, which is essentially just like recognizing that every person has a different struggle, and that no matter where everybody is, we can offer them kindness and empathy and warmth and understanding, and realizing that that just really very much sat at the core of like how I see myself as a person and as a helper. But in terms of building skill, I had to practice, right? I think that like there are still some times in which I have to sort of sit back and think about like, what do I want to say and how do I want to say it, and how is that going to be most helpful to the person that I'm sitting with, and really think about, and I'm sure that like all of you have had conversations with your friends, I'm sure, where you're like, is this a thing that I really want to say? Is this going to be helpful? Is this more about me or is it more about them, right? And so like these are things that we struggle with in our interpersonal relationships that also show up in therapy practice. And I think that what attuning myself and my skills has looked like is just learning how to do that critical reflection around those things and around myself and how I show up like all day, every day. Yeah.
I have a question. So, speaking of different types of therapy and providing people with what they need, I was just wondering, like, how do you, like, what is your thought process when you're thinking about what kind of therapy someone needs, or like what you need to provide to someone?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Because I think therapy is not one size fits all. And so I think that my very best tool for deciding what someone needs is to ask them. And I think that the kind of therapy or sort of the modality of therapy that I practice is really great for some really specific things. And so as a trauma therapist working with folks that are trying to heal from painful, impactful, dangerous experiences, the kind of therapy that I practice is like well validated for helping folks through those kinds of experiences. And so when folks come to CAPS seeking a certain kind of care around experiences that they've had, I have sort of anecdotal and research-based evidence that the kind of therapy that I practice is going to be helpful for them most of the time, right? That's not always true. And so I also think about like, what training do my coworkers or my colleagues have around specific issues? So for example, if somebody is showing up experiencing symptoms of psychosis, that might not be something that I'm really well trained in, but I know somebody on my team who is really well trained in that. And so I might refer them there, right? Or sometimes some of my colleagues will start working with somebody and they don't disclose trauma immediately, but a couple sessions in, once they feel comfortable and safe to talk about some of that harder, more painful stuff, they might then disclose their trauma. And then, you know, we might have a conversation about like, is this person still a good fit for this therapist, or might they need something that is a little bit more focused on what their experience is, right? And so I think a broad answer to your question, Christina, is that there's like a lot of really robust, very wordy, very academic research about like what kind of therapy is right for what kind of concern. And I think that that doesn't always map on exactly, right? And so my approach is always to just have really transparent conversations with the folks that I work with the students, with my clients, to say like, this is sort of how I approach the way that we might be in community or in relationship together, sort of through this therapeutic process. How does that feel for you? Is that going to work for you? And also like, can we start in on this journey together? And if something is not working for you, let's have a conversation about it and think about what might be more helpful, right? But I think like there's no perfect fit sometimes for folks. And the best thing that I can do as a therapist is really just like listen to what folks are asking me for, and trying as much as I can to provide the space for folks to give me feedback about what's working and what's not working. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I don't know if I'm just rambling or if I actually have something useful to say. So you all gotta tell me.
No, it's good. It was perfect. Yeah. I think Danny has a question.
Yeah.
So, Danny, if you want to ask it, I think Stefan's gonna unmute you.
I just unmuted myself. To you, is there anything specifically special about the community at OSU? And then I have another question after that.
Yeah. So I will say that my job at OSU is the first job that I have had as a social worker, right? I came here right out of grad school, and so I don't necessarily have something to directly compare it to outside of my experience in like doing internship work while I was a graduate student. But what I will say in my experience, the community at OSU, specifically the community like in diversity and cultural engagement, has been extraordinarily welcoming of me and the kind of work that I want to do, right? Like I came to OSU with a really clear vision of like what kind of therapy I wanted to practice and what kind of program I wanted to build. And OSU took a pretty big risk on me hiring me right out of grad school. And so I think in terms of thinking about community, like really grateful for the space that CAPS and OSU have given me to sort of just like hit the ground running and do what I want to do and be a little bit risky, right? I think that sometimes I show up in spaces with ideas that might feel challenging to people. And I have been given a lot of space and grace and support sometimes in CAPS and a lot in DCE to do that work. And I think also like thinking about the communities that have invited me into their space has been really tremendous. And like, it is like, well, I've been on campus for about 2 years now, but even when I was new on campus, I think there was like a recognition and a respect that I received from folks in the community around who I am and how I practice. And that has been really, really meaningful to me. I feel really strongly about the way that I show up as a clinician, as a professional, as a social worker. I think I've said maybe to Tamara before, but definitely in other spaces, that like I really strive to be the professional that I needed when I was a student. And I really see like such tremendous like respect and for that, and the way that folks have allowed me to do that has been really amazing. And so it's been really fulfilling for me, and at least in the feedback that I've received from a lot of the students that I work with has been really valuable to folks on campus as well. And so I'm grateful for that.
And then my second question was, how accessible is mental health help? Like, where do I go if I need it?
Yeah, at OSU or more specific, or in general?
At OSU, but in general is good too for those who are not going to OSU.
Yeah. So my disclaimer about how accessible mental health help is at OSU is that I'm speaking as somebody who is not a student, right? I'm speaking as somebody who works in the counseling center inside of the system that provides that care. And so I may not be the best sort of evaluator of how accessible that is. And I think it also really depends on who you are, right? I think sometimes care is more accessible for certain folks than it might be for others, just in terms of what their needs are, what their identities are, what they're looking for. But I will say, so CAPS offers walk-in consultation hours, or now that we're not sort of in the space physically, they're like drop-in consultation hours, right? But anytime between like 9 and 4 on any given weekday, folks can walk in and request to meet with somebody to talk about what our services look like, or how to get connected with them, or just to have somebody listen to them, or think about connecting them with other resources. And we also try really, really hard to make ourselves really visible on campus so that people know that we're here to support them and know how to access us. I think the one thing that I will say transparently is that the demand for our services generally very much outweighs like how many clinicians are available. So, and I think this is pretty true for almost every college and university sort of across the nation, is that lots of counseling centers have a wait list for folks to get in with a counselor, which is a good thing in that people are wanting to utilize our resources, but we also understand a challenge because like folks want to utilize our resources, right? And so I will say that like if folks are in like immediate need, we always make sure that folks have their needs met. So if folks are at risk or in the middle of a crisis, we always make sure that there is somebody available to help them immediately, because folks' safety is always our number one priority. In general, I will say that I wish mental health care was more accessible, right? In thinking about like what insurance covers or how to find community providers. And I think that what accessing mental health care in Portland looks like is really different than what accessing mental health care in Corvallis looks like. And that's for a number of reasons, but we're a smaller community, we're a less diverse community than Portland. The concentration of therapists looks really different. But all of that to say that I wish that it were more accessible, and I think that there is a lot of really great support in Portland from what I can tell, and certainly in Corvallis, for helping people get access to what they need. And I wonder for folks that are OSU students or were former OSU students, if you all have thoughts about what the accessibility of CAPS or mental health care is in general, or anything to add.
I would just echo that it's hard to get into CAPS. It's like from a student perspective, it's pretty hard to get into CAPS. But I would say that like DCE or like the cultural resource centers and like diversity and cultural engagement can't necessarily give like clinical help or support to folks, but are spaces where like people of color or women at the Women and Gender Center, or queer folks if they want to go to the Pride Center, can go in and find community and have really authentic conversations, and tend to get like some help in that form or facet. The groups that Sahana talked about, it's like the Women of Color group and the Women of Color Survivor group, are both groups that are run with AYA, or Women of Color program that I work in. And those are directly correlated with like the Women and Gender Center. So those are some spaces that people can and drop into. And so it's a little bit easier to get that because like our women of color group meets every Wednesday. So like they know that that's going to be sustainable for them and they can go in there and have those conversations with a clinician and then with other people who are in community with them.
And I was just going to say, when I was at OSU, I went to CAPS a few times, and I would also echo like getting your consultation can be like the first barrier and might take a little bit. But for my like perspective, when I was there, I felt really cared for, and it was like a nice opportunity that I didn't feel like I've ever had until I was at OSU, and I definitely didn't take advantage of it until I was there for 5 years, and I did not take advantage of it until my 5th year, and I wish I would have, because at times like it's just nice to talk to people, and so you don't always need to be in like dire crisis to like utilize the services. That's also important. So
yes,
yeah, my 2 cents.
Yeah, such an important contribution. Thank you, Adriana. Yeah, I think that a lot of times folks think that they like have to be in the most active of active crises to come seek us out. And I think like I understand why folks might end up there. And also I think like I am somebody who really believes that anybody could benefit from therapy at some point in their life. Like it's not a space that you have to be in just because like something is really tremendously horribly wrong in your life. It can be a really wonderful space just to think about like self-reflection and processing and how to be compassionate to yourself, or how to build better relationships with people in your life, or like how to process or move through something that might still be stuck with you that was painful. And I think like all of those are things that we offer in our services at CAPS, and hope that folks are able to take advantage of.
Thank you for that, Sahana. We do have a few, we're like a little bit over on time, but I have one question before Danya asks the wrap-up question. I think this is going to be pertinent to a lot of students who are really wanting to go in this direction. 5 years in the horizon, 10 years in the horizon, where are the biggest needs for social workers?
Whoa, that's a big question. I think especially thinking about our like very immediate current national crisis, I think that one of the most important things that social workers and care providers can do is act as an alternative to crisis intervention policing, right? I think that there is such an opportunity for folks that are trained in the way that I have been trained, or could be trained in similar ways, to think about how do we provide care to vulnerable folks that doesn't stigmatize or punish them for being vulnerable, right? Like, I think how amazing would it be if we could offer like housing and safety and food support to folks that are housing insecure, rather than like picketing them for being housing insecure, right? And so I think like as we think about moving towards a society that actually like cares for folks and their vulnerability, and creates conditions and to allow folks to be less vulnerable, that is sort of where I see the need for social workers. And I think like I know we didn't have a lot of time to talk about sort of the difference between like social work and psychology as a therapy practice, but I think that what I am most grateful for as a clinician that is trained as a social worker is the ability to understand how larger systems impact folks at an individual level, which I think is perspective that is being gained in psychology, but not one that is inherently built into psychology, and one that is inherently built into the practice of social work, right? Like really thinking about how legacies of racism and colonialism and transphobia directly impact people's individual experiences of harm or distress. And so to me, that signals the need as a helping professional to both be invested in care for my clients on an individual level, but also on dismantling the systems that create opportunities for folks to experience harm and distress in the first place. And so I think as we move sort of as a profession, as caring professionals forward, I think like the need 5, 10, 15, 20 years forward is for us all to shift in I think all of our disciplines to thinking about how do we attend to folks' needs and play the roles that we all play in sort of our ecosystem of care and change, while also thinking about how to shift that system so that folks are less vulnerable, less impacted, more able to thrive in the places that they live and be supported and happy and whole.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we're at the end already. We're going to have to wrap up this conversation. But before we end it, we're going to do the elevator pitch where, let's just say, I'm gonna make it a switch because Stefan does it a little different. But let's say you're in an elevator, you have 30 seconds before the elevator closes, and then the younger you that's 10 years old comes up to you, and you have 30 seconds before you have to go to work, or well, yeah, before you have to go up to the elevator, and they're like, Sahana, that's yourself. So you're like, Sahana, why should I become a social worker? Why should I be a CPAS? Why should I be at OSU? What do you have to say?
Yeah, put me on the spot like that. Okay. I think that what I have to say to myself, and also what I constantly remind myself of when I am feeling weary, is that this is the best way for me to use the natural talents that I have to support other people. My goal has always been to show up for the folks in my life that need me in the best way that I can with what I have, and this is how I can do that, right? And I also think about something that my mom told me when I was young, which was that so my mom was always the person that would like the school, like teachers and school administrators were always kind of scared of her, because when she showed up, she was showing up to fight for me. There was something that I needed, and she wasn't going to let them not give me what I needed. And she always told me, like, I had to model being an advocate for you so that you could learn how to be an advocate for yourself. And I think about that a lot in the way that I show up to my work, right? Like, there are folks that the system does not allow to advocate for themselves, as capable as they might be of doing that. And so as somebody who has a voice and power within a system, it is my obligation to use that power to show up for folks that need me. And I think, like, it is so tremendous to witness how transformational change is possible. Like, the healing and resilience that I have seen from some of the folks that I work with that have experienced like unbelievable harm and violence, and the ways in which they are able to move through that and return to wholeness and live lives that feel like amazing and meaningful for them, like, that makes my work valuable, and that makes me feel like that I'm able to show up with the things that I have in a way that supports people. So that's my elevator pitch.
Thank you. That was
Starry-eyed
beautiful.
10-year-old Sahana like walks out of the elevator and is like, I know what I'm doing with my life. All right, well, we've come to the time of reflection. So I've pulled up. Can everybody see that screen? Just want to make sure. There's 3 questions here. Feel free to either write them in the chat, to unmute yourself and just go ahead and tell us what you got. So those 3 questions are, what did you learn from this interview with Sahana that you're excited about? And what can you do and use with this information moving forward? And then as a side note here is, how can we as Passion Impact improve this experience for you? So usually this is the time, I mean, Danya said at the beginning, right, Danya? The joke?
Yep.
If you got one, at least. You don't want to hear mine.
I do have a joke, but it is not a social work joke. It's a dad joke.
Oh,
so I hope
so on board.
So, all right. So 2 windmills are standing next to each other in a field, right? And one windmill says to the other windmill, hey man, what kind of music do you like? And the other windmill goes, oh, I'm a big metal fan.
Oh my God, that is good. I'm going to use that with my roommate. He actually is a metal fan. That's perfect. That is perfect. Thank you. I'm not going to share anymore. Does anybody want to throw out some ideas rather than typing? You're more than welcome to keep typing if you want, or if you want to just throw some of your thoughts out. Whoops, we're going to go back one. I'm really bad with this like dual screen thing. Sorry. Danny says, I learned that it is okay to pull a 180 with your major and switch it up. Sure is. Sure is. I learned that it can be very beneficial to take advantages of the resources available to me, even if I'm not going through the worst of the worst. Absolutely, Christina. That's why those people are there. Sahana's there for you for those reasons. And that doesn't mean that it's only at OSU. There are many other schools that have those opportunities too. It's just navigating that system. The advocacy person that Sahana was talking about, right? That person that can potentially help you learn that and how to work through it. Other thoughts? Other thoughts? Mary says, I learned that there are many, is that right, Mary? Many, okay, cool. Different types of social workers, some being clinical and administrators. Also that a lot of social workers go through a fear of feeling locked once they pick a specific track. And there are so many tracks. Melissa says, I relearned and that I'm stoked to become a social worker in 2021 and meet more people like Sahana and world and to foster more empathy for social change. Amen to that. Amen. Fantastic. Sasha, Danny, Danya, anybody else? Danny says, I think I'm having something or someone at PI. I think having something or someone at PI to help with mental health could be cool, would be very welcoming. That's a fantastic idea. And maybe we can talk about that with Sahana, some ideas around what we can do. I echo that, Danny, yes, everywhere. Keep in mind, we do have a partner that is, what's it called? Youth Lines. Youth Lines is an organization from 4 to 10 p.m. every evening. You can text, call, email, chat. A student on the other side of that technology, if you're going through any type of hard time, and they're there to listen to you and be with you. So that's also a good opportunity to volunteer, to start understanding what this world is like. Tamara says, something that I learned from Sahana is about the power to use clinical social work in the future to imagine new ways for community care work, policing. That's fantastic. Yeah, what could we do? What if? Danny, we should have more workshops with Youthline. Okay, amen to that one too. Write that one down. I learned Tamara should have kept with her psychology major and continued that route because she wants to do social work and talks about it all the time. Guess what? Danny said it too. You can 180. You can 180 at any point in time. You can go back and do another.
There's still time. There's still time.
Awesome. Well, if there's any others, feel free to keep adding them. I'll come back to them. I agree with Danny. You got this tomorrow. Yeah, dude, you got it from Mary. Mary's the queen of energy. You got it. Let's just touch base on next week. Next week, we have 2 fantastic women joining us for our next informational interview. Kristen Gonzalez and Sam Romero. Christina and Danya, we met them. Is there anything that y'all would like to say about these 2 women that we're going to be interviewing next week?
Well, just any of you guys that are here, to just feel free to come and learn something new.
Heck yeah. Christina, any thoughts on Kristen and Sam?
I don't think I've met them yet.
Oh, was it? Oh, it was Kayla. Sorry. Kayla and Danya. Met her. My bad. These 2 women have used their heritage to influence their designs. They are really phenomenal, and so we're excited to interview them. Same time here in the Zoom call. Also, if you want to get sweaty, if you want to breathe hard, Wednesdays, Christina and Kayla host workouts. It was intense today, very intense today. On Fridays, we host games with Mary and Alan. Mary, any thoughts as to what this Friday is going to bring us?
I'm not sure, but it'll be fun, and hopefully, the people that are gonna be at the info interviews and oh my god, I can't talk. Interviews next week. Hopefully, they can come. I think that'll be fun.
I did invite them, and they did mention that they were interested in coming, so I'll follow up and check with them on that note. And who can come to those, Mary?
Anyone that signs up, basically. It's just anyone, and it'll be fun. It's super chill.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it, Mary. All right. With that, we want to say thank you so much, Sahana, for your time. It has been wonderful. If you guys all want to unmute yourselves so we can give her a yippee.
Thank you all so much for having me. It's been such a joy.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Sahana, you can come to game day too.
Yeah.
If I don't have
you
anything going on Friday, I will absolutely do that.
Yay.
And also, Stefan has my contact information. So if you all ever have any other questions, or there are things that like occur to you after this hour, or you just like want to talk about the social work or whatever, you're more than welcome to shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to make that.
I will send out an email tomorrow with this video along with a way to get in touch with Sahana. So please make sure that you have your eyes peeled to your email. Also, only the people from this meeting get that email. So that's the benefit of coming to this. All right. So just know that for future reference. Cool. All right. Y'all are beautiful people. Sahana, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
really
you
appreciate
all.
it. Enjoy your evening, y'all.
Take care, everyone.